Welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you're not alone. This is your one-stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have Mike Fink with us. Together, we're going to explore some transformative decision-making skills with Mike, who's an author, a coach, and the inventor of the Decoding Grid. Mike has dedicated over 2 decades to personal development, specializing in empowering women facing tough decisions about their marriages. With a rich international background and a master's from Yale, I am absolutely not the smartest person in the room today, that is for sure. Mike brings a unique perspective to helping individuals align their head, their heart, and gut to make confident choices. Today, we're going to delve into how his revolutionary method can change the way you face some of life's biggest decisions. So listen, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your divorce or your current station in life, please don't be. Mike's here to help us break it down so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clearer picture of not only your financial situation, but how you can tackle some of the personal challenges that you might be facing as well. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up, and let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Hey, Mike, it's so great to have you with us. I think this is going to be an amazing show.
Thank you, Jamie. It's really my pleasure to be here. And what a great introduction. So awesome to be here.
Yeah, man. You've been around the world traveler. You've got this degree from Yale, and you've got all these amazing experiences. I thought this would be a perfect conversation to have, especially based on the people that we work with, right? We work with a lot of people that are trying to figure out the divorce process and learn more about the finances and not make bad decisions there and so on. And a lot of them, and we talked about this on the lead up to our show here in our private conversation, they kind of get stuck on the decision-making process. So talk to me a little bit more about that. I mean, you can certainly formally introduce yourself in case I missed anything there, but I want to learn more about how do we get over that hump if we are stuck in trying to make this decision about actually getting divorced first? Because that's a huge first step.
Absolutely. So the reality, Jamie, is that many women who are considering divorce, probably even before they come to see you, they are stuck in indecision and anxiety because they just fear that they're going to make a mistake they will regret. And what I do is I help them make the right decision with clarity, with certainty, so that they can actually start moving forward towards a happier life with inner peace. Because this is what we were talking about just before the call. A lot of women make this decision, but while there's a small percentage who are just dead on set, yeah, divorce is the right decision, the majority, and rightly so, and you'll understand better why also when I go deeper, have still that, is that the right decision? Those second guesses, those doubts that creep up. And it's really human nature, because I will tell you that this is one of the toughest decisions any human being can make. I mean, you went through a divorce yourself, right? And it's extremely complex. There are a lot of variables to consider. And also the cost of failure is extremely high. If you get it wrong, it will affect you emotionally, psychologically, financially, obviously, you know that, maybe professionally, maybe socially, and not only yourself, but also your kids. So the stakes are so high that you want to make sure that you're going to make the right decision. And what happens is that there's actually a biological mechanism in our brain that is the primal brain. Maybe you heard about this reptilian brain, the old brain, which is in charge of our survival, right? Have you heard about the fight or flight response, Jamie?
I have, and we should talk a little bit about this because I had some health issues during my own divorce where I was constantly stuck in that fight or flight response for it gradually got worse over a period of time. And frankly, it probably started with the divorce, but it was in the years after the divorce where I was still stuck in that mode, and I ended up having some health issues because of that. So we can circle back on that here in a little bit if you want, but I definitely have heard of it, and it's not fun.
It's not fun. And there's actually a third response that is less known and that people may think is the combination of fight or flight, but it's actually a little bit different. It's called the freeze response. It's whenever you are faced with something that could be so potentially dangerous, your brain says, hey, hold your horses, because when in doubt, wait it out. You may remember some action movies where there's a hero and he's with other people, and then they cross this kind of suspended bridge made with those shaky wooden planks and just being held by rope. And at some point, one of the characters goes and they look down the bridge and they see this huge cliff and they say, oh my gosh, if I make a misstep, I risk, falling to my death. And then they just freeze. They don't move forward. They don't move backwards, right? And that's a natural protection of our brain to say, hey, whenever it's so dangerous, unless you have 100% certainty, well, keep your status quo. And this is why you may have experience with your clients that some people come and say, yeah, let's do this. And then a couple of weeks later, say, you know what? I've thought about it. Maybe we'll give it another go. Maybe there's a chance that things will improve. And the reality is that unless you have absolute certainty, logically, but I'm going to also talk about it emotionally and intuitively, that it is the right decision, your brain, because it's the way it's programmed, will push you or keep you stuck in place because it's a very basic survival mechanism. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely. And I never really thought about it this way, because it's challenging, because you have all these decisions to make and you're not sure which one's the right one.
Absolutely. So I can go in so many different directions. Let me go into one thing, which is the main problem that women considering divorce face is not so much being in an unhappy relationship. I mean, obviously that's part of it. But the thing that keeps them awake at night is the indecision of what do I do about it? It's whenever they toss and turn in bed, it's like, should I stay or should I go? Whenever they think about it first thing in the morning, or being also with their kids and not being able to be fully engaged because they cannot be 100% authentic or just tell them the whole truth of how they feel inside. All those thoughts come from the indecision, should I stay or should I go? And our brain craves closure. When the brain cannot have the answer, it keeps going over and over. But since there's no clear answer because it's such a complex decision, it keeps spinning its wheels and it's exhausting and it keeps you stuck in this indecision. And the brain goes, hey, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So I'm saying this because you mentioned that I've been in the field of personal development for 2 decades and a half. And the reality is that I was in another field before shifting my life mission to help women make this important decision with clarity and certainty. So let me give you why I got to this point. Basically, this is the process that I'm going to talk about today is the result of 2 decades of expertise and 5 years of grueling pain of indecision. It was not a personal relationship. It was a 50-50 business relationship. The first 5 years were okay, but after 5 years, it became clear that we had different values, that he was seeing the world one way, I was seeing the world the other way, and the business was becoming harder and harder to work, and we were having constant arguments all the time. And this is where I understood that the pain of indecision is almost like chronic pain. Some days are better, some days are worse, but overall your quality of life is miserable because it's always there in the back of your mind. And even a lot of people who maybe for some reason, one way or another, have made that step of going and contacting you because they want to get their affairs in order, but they're still second guessing themselves. Is that really the right thing? Did I do everything that I could to save my marriage? And it all goes back to fear of regret. Maybe they have started having the conversation with their kids, but are they going to understand? Can I really explain the decision to myself? Because if you cannot explain your decision to yourself with clarity, it's even harder to explain to others. So there's this huge internal conflict in terms of super complex decision, because you have 20 to 30 variables to consider at least whenever you try to assess a relationship. And if that sounds like a lot of variables to you or to your listeners, it means that they're not taking into consideration all the pieces of the puzzle. And then if you get it wrong, it's like, what do I do? Okay, so I'm going to share something with you, which is this model of the brain. And basically, for those of you who are listening, you can think of the brain as an ice cream cone that has 3 scoops of ice cream layered one on top of the other. And the first scoop of ice cream here at the base of the brain, it's called the old brain, the primal brain, the reptilian brain, which is that part of the brain I just talked about, which is in charge of survival, the fight or flight or freeze response. And that part of the brain was formed about 500 million years ago. And then you have another part, which is the emotional brain. There's a second layer of ice cream scoop on top, which is the emotional brain, which has to do with our emotions. And that one was formed about 200 million years ago. And then finally, we have the last layer, which is the neocortex, the rational brain, the one that has reasoning abilities, that also is in charge of language. But that part of the brain was formed about 2 to 3 million years ago. And this is why, even if you logically understand, yes, okay, I think I'm better off divorcing, first of all, you need to have absolute certainty, even on a logical level. But if you don't, but let's say you have that logical certainty, then it's not enough, because we just established that the rational brain was the most recent addition to the brain, which means that if that part of the brain is in charge of language, the other parts of the brain, in particular the primal brain and emotional brain, evolved before we developed language. And that means, Jamie, those parts of the brain do not understand words. Now, this is huge, because what are the implications? The implication is that we are trying to make a decision in a way that works only with 1/3 of our mind, our logical brain. And they will come to you and say, well, I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. What about the impact on my finances? What about the impact on this, on that? But all this, or even people who still try to save their marriage with marriage counseling or therapy, are solutions that use words. And the primal brain, emotional brain, which are the gatekeepers of people's decision, do not understand words. So what are we to do, right? That's a conundrum. So if they do not understand words, what do they understand? And instead of me giving you the answer, let's walk together through a thought experiment, you and also your listeners, to see what is the language that those parts of the brain understand. So do you have children, Jamie?
We have 5 between the two of us. We are a blended family of 5. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to walk you through this thought experiment. Let's imagine, do you have a child that is in middle school, maybe?
I do. I have a 12-year-old.
Okay. Okay. So imagine that your 12-year-old is in middle school, and you find out one day that your child is being physically bullied. I would assume that as a parent, you would be extremely upset. Is that a fair statement?
100%.
Okay. So now I'm going to walk you through this thought experiment. I'm going to give you that piece of information that your child is being physically bullied in school, but in 4 different ways. And let's explore how each way affects your level of upset. So way number 1, a person comes to you and says, hey, Jamie, your child is being physically abused in school. So you just hear it, but you don't know what the other child looks like. You would be upset, probably, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take that as the baseline. Second scenario, a person comes and talks to you and says, hey, Jamie, your child is being physically bullied in school, but this time you know what the kid who's doing the bullying looks like. How is your level of upset? Lower, equal, or a bit more?
Probably a bit more, and now I'm questioning, is this a female or a male?
Okay.
Now my mind's starting to go.
You know what they look like.
Yeah.
You know what they look like. So you know that they are a female or a male.
Okay. I'm getting more angry. Yep.
You're more angry. Third scenario. The person comes and shows you pictures of your child being physically bullied at school. How is your level of upset? Less, equal, or more?
Definitely more.
Okay. Fourth scenario. You drive to school to pick up your child. You get off the car, and then you physically witness, you see it with your own eyes, your child being physically bullied. How is your level of upset now?
Definitely higher than the previous 3 scenarios.
Right? Okay. So what we experienced here was a crescendo from, I was upset, but now I'm really upset, right? And listen to this, because it was the same exact piece of information. Your child is being physically bullied at school. Mm-hmm. What was the difference, Jamie, between the 4 scenarios?
All the details.
Yes, but more specifically, what kind of details?
Visual.
Yes, you got it. Whenever you had a clear image, you were the most upset because you saw it with your eyes. And you were having this crescendo because the more I went, the more you were able to visualize what was happening. In the first scenario, you were just hearing it. In the second scenario, you knew what the child doing the bullying looked like. In the third scenario, you had pictures. In the fourth scenario, you actually saw it live. So that means that those parts of your brain, what they understand are not words, but you can communicate with them visually. And one of the things that differentiates the method that I have created, this decoding grid, to help people or women make a decision about their relationship, is to include a visual way to communicate to their emotional brain and primal brain the status of their relationship. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Absolutely.
Okay. So let me give you a few more things, kind of the 3 steps that I walk people through whenever they have to make this decision, so that they can make that decision knowingly having their head aligned with their heart, aligned with their gut. And by the way, after 5 years of indecision, when I finally decided to apply my own medicine because I had realized that I had developed this process, but for some reason I did not apply it 10 years prior, even though I had those gnawing voices eating at me and like, should you really get into this partnership? But then when I applied my process, all of a sudden I went from anxiety, burnout, depression, stress to, I can see clearly now. I felt that my head was aligned with my heart, was aligned with my gut. And then I took my spouse's brother. Her brother was a medical doctor. He needed to make some important decisions in terms of his career. And I took him from a place where he had spent 2 years in anxiety, thinking about it all the time with almost nausea when the topic of thinking came to him, what should I do? And in 2 hours, I took him from complete confusion and anxiety to absolute clarity and inner peace. And he told me like, wow, okay, it was like I was stumbling in a pitch dark room, hurting myself on the furniture, and now you turn on the light and I can see clearly. So it wasn't only that he knew what to do, but it was about how he felt when he had made that decision. And I'm sure that in your practice, you have some women who come and maybe their spouse just did something terrible to them. Maybe they cheated, maybe they stole, and they're just done. It was like an instant deal breaker. They just know with their head, with their heart, and with their gut that it was the right thing to do, to divorce, and they just move forward. But most women, in my experience and in your experience, they still have those second guesses because they are not sure. And their primal brain keeps it stuck in status quo with the hope like, who knows, maybe things could change. In fact, I hear a lot of women that I work with who tell me, I wish my husband were a jerk, because if that were the case, I could make the decision easily. So step number one is you have to gather all the pieces of the puzzle, because in order for you to make a clear decision, you need to have the relevant elements. And by the way, I have here, two Rubik cubes. One is completely jumbled and the other one is solved. All the colors are aligned. Now, Jamie, even though one is jumbled and one is solved, are any pieces missing in the jumbled cube in terms of the color stickers or the smaller cubes?
No, I mean, it's all the same colors and same number of squares.
Right. Everything all the pieces are still there. They're just jumbled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I discovered is that all the pieces necessary to make the decision with your head, heart, and gut are already there. It's just that people don't know how to make sense of them. But when you apply the proper sequence, then you can put them in order, follow the algorithm, and get to a solved cube. And in this case, to a solved decision or the right decision. Because otherwise, if you don't gather all the pieces of the puzzle, it's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle that has 1,000 pieces and you only have 200 of them. Mm-hmm. I remember this client, she was like, my husband cheated on me. Yes, but he's an amazing dad. And it was like back and forth. One, yes, but. And in reality, women consider more than two, maybe 3, 4, or 5, and they keep weighing the pros and cons. But the reality is that there are between 20 to 30 things that you need to consider to assess your relationship entirely. Does that make sense so far?
It does. It sounds like a lot.
I know, but trust me, it's a sure sign that people are missing, if that sounds like a lot, important variables. Because when you start digging and really thinking, okay, I want a partner who is maybe funny, who is emotionally supportive, physically affectionate, who is successful, who can be a good role model for my kids, who likes action movies. I mean, when you really take the time to think deeply, they all add up. And in my experience, it's between 20 to 30. It's very, very consistent. So wow. The fact that, it is surprising for most people, but number one, you need to have the pieces of the puzzle if you won't even have the hope to solve the puzzle. Number two is about once you have those pieces, it's like, okay, now I understand all the things that are important to me, but what do I do with that? And I have a saying that values, the things that are important to you, are not an equal vote democracy. They are a military hierarchy. And let me explain what I mean by that. Let me walk you through another experiment. Let's say that you're looking for a house, right? I mean, you mentioned that actually you have your house on the market, yeah. And I imagine the time will come for you to look for your dream house. Let's say that you're looking for your dream house and you have 20 things that are important to you. And one day, a friend of yours comes and says, Jamie, I have found your dream house. And he has 19 things out of 20. Are you going like, yes, this is a good thing or not? What's your reaction?
Probably going to lean towards this is an amazing opportunity. Yeah.
And you could be right, but the real answer is it depends. What if the one thing missing is that it's in a different state, and city
True.
that you
Yeah,
want to live.
I didn't think about that from that perspective. Yeah, it might not have
Right.
running water. Who knows?
There
Who knows?
you go. And if that running water is one of those things that's really important to you. So that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that you have 95 or 60 or 70% of the things that you're looking for. It's not about how many, it's about which ones. And
Mhm.
in order for you to make sense of the which ones, you have to understand what is more important versus less important. And not only that, being able to rank them by order, and you need a very specific step-by-step process because 20 to 30 is a lot of variables to be able to juggle mentally. So you have to do it in writing. And then even then in writing, there's a very specific process. But once you know in which order they go from the most important to the least important, you also need to distinguish between what is essential versus optional. Maybe essential is, yes, I want it to be with running water in that city and state, but maybe something optional in the real estate example is, well, I'd like it to have extra storage room. And if it doesn't, well, okay, you can live with that.
Mhm.
But the only way for you to understand what you can and cannot compromise on in a relationship is to have clarity as to what is absolutely essential, not negotiable, versus optional. It's nice to have, but I can do without. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Cool. Now, there's another thing, which is you also need to understand and identify any long-term deal breakers. And let me explain what I mean by that, because there really are two kinds of deal breakers. The first one is the one that most people are most familiar with. I call them instant deal breakers. This is the example of he cheated on me, or he stole from me, or he was physically abusive with me. Something which is very, very individual, but something for which, you know what, if this happens, I'm done, and that's it.
Mhm.
Now, that's an instant deal breaker. In that case, people just know what the right decision is. The instances where people still keep second guessing themselves is when there are what I call cumulative deal breakers. And let me give you an example to illustrate that. Let's say that you go to a restaurant and you get there, it's a good restaurant, but there's construction noise because they're doing renovations in the shop next door.
Mhm.
Now, you're going to ask the owner of the restaurant, how long is this going to go on? If the answer is just 5 minutes, most likely you'll say, okay, you know what, I'll put up with it for 5 minutes and then we'll have a great meal. But if the answer is, it's going to go on for the rest of the day, that's a no-go, right? It's a deal breaker. Why? Because that thing will happen continuously over time.
Yeah.
And this is a more subtle thing for people to distinguish, but you can only distinguish it if you are aware of what is essential versus what is optional first. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I had a client, her name was Kate, and she had been married for 20 years and wondering whether to divorce or not for the previous 5 years. And she kept going back and forth. And when I led her through the process of the decoding grid, we identified all the things that were important to her, we ordered them by order of importance. And then it turned out that her husband fulfilled 70% of the things that were important to her, which you can say, if you think, well, it's not bad, if you think it's an equal with democracy, that's not bad. The problem, though, was that most of the things that were being fulfilled were in the optional category, and in her essentials, the top five, the first five most important things to her were not fulfilled.
Mhm.
And obviously, that's like in the example of the house, five is just too many. And then she was like, wow, this is a huge eye opener. And she understood, number one, why she had not been happy, but now she could explain it in words and also understand it emotionally. And also she could understand that even though her husband may have been willing to make all the changes, it was not realistic for her to expect that he would be able to change dramatically long-term on five things. And that really gave her the absolute clarity and certainty that, you know what, now I get it.
Yeah.
This relationship will never work long-term in a way that will keep me sufficiently fulfilled. And this is when she decided to move on, and she was able to do so with peace of mind without second guessing herself anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is amazing. And to kind of intertwine the financial here, right? This is like where we get stuck on the financial decisions, right? We don't have enough information about what our future life is going to look like and how I'm going to generate income, what my career is going to look like, how I'm going to keep a roof over the kids' heads, all these things. And these are major decisions that people have to make. And if you're saying that like some of these decisions are broken down into, 20 to 30 mini components, there's a lot of decisions that you need to make. If I'm just thinking about the financial aspect, I'm thinking about like alimony conversations and negotiations about who's going to keep the house and who's going to, how much of the retirement account are you going to keep, and who's going to handle the taxes this year, and how are we going to file taxes next year? Like, oh, from your perspective, you have all these other amazing examples. I'm thinking through the financials because that's what kind of the world we live in. If every single one of those decisions is broken down into all these mini decisions along the way, or like I need all these bits of information to make a good decision, almost every case we have, there could be hundreds, if not thousand decisions that have the things that have to be in line for people to make a good decision. Am I following along the right way?
Well, in a way, it's interesting because you are such a smart person that you immediately saw some of the implications. And one thing that I will say is that this methodology that I have developed can actually be applied to a wide range of decisions. I chose the divorce one because divorcing is one of the toughest decisions in terms of levels of complexity and levels of cost of failure. Having said that, thankfully, it's less variables than what you say in terms of it's not 20 to 30 for every single thing. It's not 1,000. There may be some macro decisions, but at the end of the day, it's more about understanding the values that underlie those decisions, right? And because everything that our values determine what our goals are, what we judge as right or wrong, and provides us with the direction and the motivation to go towards those goals. So what you could do, though, is understand you probably, some of your clients have a lot of financial decisions and different options. Like option A, you get to keep, I don't know, the house versus the retirement account, or let's talk about different options in terms of divisions of assets. Well, the right answer will come up out of understanding really the most important things to you and in what order. Now, they're probably not 20 to 30. They may be maybe 5 or 6. But let me give you an example in terms of how we make decisions, because understanding the role of values in our decisions will be illustrated by this. Has it ever happened to you that you've gone to the restaurant and you look at the menu and you're not sure what food to order, and you keep going like, I don't know about this one or this one or this one? Did that ever happen to you?
All the time.
Okay. So for most people, maybe it's not exactly what's behind you for, the values are behind your choices. But let's take a common example. For most people, whenever they go to the restaurant, they have, let's pick 3 things. They want something that tastes good, something tasty, something healthy, and let's say something reasonably priced. Maybe it could be something that it's a big portion if they're hungry or whatever. But let's take, tasty, healthy, and reasonably priced. If you go to the restaurant and you look at the menu and you have one that has all 3, it's a go, go, go. No brainer. If you go and look at the menu and there's none of those things, not tasty, not healthy, it's all super priced, it's a no, no, no. The problem happens when you have like one but not the other. It's like, oh, it's tasty, yes, but it's not healthy. Oh, it's healthy, yeah, but it costs more. And you go into this yes, but, yes, but, yes, but dance or endless loop. And the reality is that the only way for you to make a proper decision is to understand, okay, what's most important to me? Is it health? Is it taste? Or is it price? Mm-hmm. Because according to the answer to this question, you will make a different choice. If health is more important than taste, you'll choose the salad. If taste is more important, you'll choose the burger. If price is more important, maybe you'll get the pizza or whatever that is, right? But here's the thing, just with 3 variables, we're getting confused because our brain has a hard time kind of juggling those things. And you can go from confusion to clarity when you start creating some order in terms of hierarchy, ranking what's most important to least important. But the first thing is really bringing up to the surface, what are my driving mechanisms? What's important to me when I make those decisions, right? Yeah. And most people are not necessarily aware. In fact, they may be even more aware when they buy a car than when making a financial decision or a divorce decision, because they know that maybe they want performance or economy or space. They think more about how to buy a car. I mean, what is important to us in a car is more present. We're more aware of that. But the underlying mechanism of how we make decisions is pretty much the same. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What you're describing aligns with some of the work that we do. We don't do it to the level that you do, and because you're the expert here, we make a good go at this. But one of the things that we'll do with all of our clients is the very first exercise we take them through is we have them fill out a worksheet called a My Priorities worksheet. And it's in the area, 3 different areas. It's in relation to the property, in relation to other financial assets, right? So retirement accounts, things of that nature, and also in relation to the kids. And we have them, and there's just we don't. It's not this laborious thing, but we have them go through it and just say, okay, like we want to know what your priorities are in each of these categories, right? Like, I want to put the kids in, I want to keep the kids in the same school, and I want little Johnny to be able to continue his extracurricular activities, and I want to be able to split custody with the other parent, and so on and so forth, right? But we also have them go through the same exercise and think through the lens of the other spouse and their partner, and say, like, what do you think their priorities are going to be in each of these categories? And we do a little compare and contrast exercise, and I think it stimulates some of the decision making that you're walking us through today, and helping us get over some of the barriers that we face. But it also allows us to think about what the other side is thinking. And I think that's really impactful, because from a negotiation perspective, if he wants to keep the house and she wants to keep the house, then we know that's going to be an area of discussion, and we're going to have to work out the negotiations there, right? If his priority is to stay in the state and be close to his kids, and she wants the same, and now there's some alignment, right? So there we can figure out kind of where there's that we're comparing, contrasting these goals. And I feel like it aligns really well with the work that you do, and so now I'm taking all these mental notes for when I have conversations with our future clients. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think first of all, let me commend you, because I think you're right on the nose, right on the money. Let's talk about it this way. When you elicit what's important to them, I think that the piece of understanding or trying to make the best possible guess in terms of what's important to the other party it's very important. What I would say is that in terms of if you ask people, what are your priorities? Unfortunately, as a human beings, we have a hard time really understanding what's more important versus less important when we start having a larger number of variables, which is usually from 3 on. So that's why there's a very specific process that I developed that really walks you through in a way that's repeatable, so that you always get the same result. And regardless of how many variables you have, you always end up put them in the proper order of importance. So what I have to say is congratulations. That's absolutely the right approach. And, maybe you can take some notes in terms of how to help them do those priorities. Now, I know time is running by, and I'm very passionate about what I do. There's one very important piece that I want to add to kind of close the loop, because in a way, until now, I have shared how people can get certainty and clarity and certainty with their rational brain, which is gathering all the pieces of the puzzle, understanding what's more important versus less important, what's essential versus optional. And then the most important piece, and this is the one that for years I saw it was happening, but then it took me really the research in the neuroscience to understand why, is how do you present that logical information to your brain so that it resonates emotionally as well? And the key to do that is to use the visual channel. So basically, once we have all the values ranked in order, distinguished between essential versus optional, I use that as a decoding grid, like the key answer grid that people put on the multiple choices questionnaires, right? You have the key grid, you put it, and then all at once you can see which answers are correct, which ones are not. And basically by using some languages and preconditioning that your brain already understands, like red means no, green means go, orange means warning, right? Blue means neutral. Then you can see all at once an immediate assessment of your entire relationship. And you can see, well, what about my essentials? Is it in the red zone versus the green zone? What about my deal breakers? Are there any deal breakers? Is that in the red zone, in the green zone, in the blue zone? And this visual language is the one that enables the brain to really integrate things at a deeper level. I'm just going to, because this is such an important and revolutionary concept. Nobody talks about it. I wasn't even before I dug deep. But have you ever watched a movie like Rocky, and you have seen it already? You know that Rocky is going to win at the end. He's going to beat Ivan Drago. And yet, logically it has a happy ending, But throughout the movie, emotionally, you go through the anxiety. It's like, oh my God. Does that ever happen to you? Have you ever wondered
All the
why?
time, man, all the time. There are definitely
It
some
happens
movies.
to me as well.
Definitely
It
some
happens
movies
to
that I've
everyone.
watched, and yeah, definitely some movies that I've watched, and you already know the ending, and you're still on the edge of your seat.
Yes, but why? And the answer is that you may know that it's a happy ending logically, but what your emotional brain and primal brain are seeing visually in the moment is Rocky Balboa being pummeled and bleeding. And for them, that's the language they understand. It doesn't matter how many times you can tell yourself with words, well, but it's going to end up well. What they see is what they get. So that's why that third part, that visual component, the decoding grid, that presents kind of the assessment of the entire relationship visually is the thing that brings the clincher so that there's this emotional alignment or alignment between the head, the heart, and the gut. And really, in that case, women can really understand logically why they want to divorce, why their relationship will never work. They can explain it to themselves and to their kids in a way that makes sense, where they can look at their kids in the eye because they feel confident about it. And they also feel internally, they just know deep within themselves, yeah, now I know it's the right thing to do. And that's when they can come to see you and implement all the wonderful financial strategies and negotiation and so on wholeheartedly, because now they can implement the how once they have a what and a why that is absolutely certain and clear and certain. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, man. This has been an incredible conversation. I think we're going to pull out so many important nuggets of information. There's going to be a lot of information that's going to be we're going to be able to share with people, through social media and what have you, with all of this. I mean, this is just, I'm fascinated by this stuff. I mean, it's maybe I should have gone, in your direction and for some respects, but I'm glad I chose the career path that I did, and I get to help people on the financial side. That's for sure. So how I'm going to share some of the your bio and all the links and everything else for social media, what have you, in the show notes. So if you're listening, folks, if you're listeners, if you're driving, you don't have to pull over and jot down this information. I'm going to make sure it's in the show notes for you later. But what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, and when they do, talk to me a little bit about what that initial experience is like in those first few moments with you.
So the best way to reach me is to go to my website, which is called divorcedecisiondecoded.com. So divorcedecisiondecoded.com. Otherwise, you can search for my name, Mike Fink, divorce, and my LinkedIn profile will show up at divorcedecisiondecoded.com, because the title of I wrote a book where I talk about, in details about all the things that we just discussed here in the show, which is called Divorce Decision Decoded. And when you get to that website, you'll be able also to book a discovery call with me and see how I work with my clients. If that's what you want to do, you can send me an email, or you can get the book to get even deeper there and read case studies, understand what we talked about today even deeper. At the time of this recording, I even give you the audiobook, because I understand that a lot of people are busy, so they can listen on the go and listen to that. And basically, people who may be interested in working with me, it's like probably in the same way like you do. You have a first call to understand their specific situations, their struggles, their goals, and then whether you are the best fit to help them. And then you tell them the different options about how they can work with you. So divorcedecisiondecoded.com, and I'll be happy to help anybody who wants to find out more.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Mike, for sharing such invaluable insights with us today. To our listeners, if you're intrigued by the Decoding Grid and want to learn more about making aligned decisions, again, visit divorcedecisionsdecoded.com. We're going to put a link to all this stuff in the show notes, like I mentioned, so don't worry about jotting that down. But remember, if you're seeking support or guidance on your own personal financial journey, you can always find help with us at Allegiant Divorce Solutions at allegiantds.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more empowering conversations. And until next time, keep making decisions that move you confidently forward in life.